So, good morning, everyone. My name is Vincent Andrearczyk. I'm a researcher at the University of Applied Sciences of Western Switzerland. I will present our work on consistency of scale equivariance in internal representations of convolutional networks. This is related with the interpretability of deep networks as we try to understand the internal behavior of commonly used CNNs. And opening the black box, as it is often called, is important both for researchers, for example, to debug and improve performance, and also for end users like clinicians for their trust in the model and for correct use. I will start with an introduction, giving some context of this work. So scale invariance is approximately learned in convolutional networks trained on natural images. As illustrated on the right, whatever scale at which we input an albatross, for example, the CNN will classify it as an albatross. Now, CNNs are often pre-trained on natural images, generally ImageNet, and fine-tuned on specific tasks such as medical imaging. But a key difference between natural images and other domains such as medical imaging is the viewpoint. The viewpoint is unknown in natural images as shown in the top right image. This explains the need for invariance to scale as objects may appear small or big. In other applications, we have a fixed viewpoint, and the pixel spacing has a meaning in physical dimensions. The scale carries crucial information. For example, the size of a nuclei in histopathology or the size of a tumor in an MRI scan. I will now briefly present our previous work. In a recent paper that we will present at IMIMIC 2020 at MICAI, we evaluated the invariance to scale at different layers inside pre-trained CNNs. For that, we used a regression of image scale ratios in intermediate activations of the CNNs. As shown in the figure, we have input images with associated scale ratios. We regress these scale ratios in different intermediate layers and evaluate the regressions. The results showed that scale information is present inside the CNN and invariance is learned in the final layer. You see the blue line is the determination coefficient for the regression trained on the pre-trained network. We then used these results to improve transfer learning. So we pruned the network to improve the prediction of magnification in histopathology images. We removed the layers after the one containing most scale information and trained a magnification prediction network on top. The results showed a large increase in the performance as compared to using the entire network without pruning. So this was the case for Inception V3 and ResNet 50 networks. So after showing that the scale information is present and encoded in the pre-trained CNNs, a remaining question was how is scale encoded in the intermediate layers? Is it encoded by an individual feature map or as a complex combination of feature maps? Is this encoding consistent across classes, so across the data manifold, or is it class specific? And this is what we want to tackle in this paper. So I will present in more detail the methods that we used. So the image scale ratios are computed for each image using bounding boxes. So it's a ratio using the area of the image and the area of the bounding box around the object. Below we have example of ratio values ranging from 0 to 1. We evaluate the mixed 8 intermediate layer of a pre-trained Inception V3 network. This layer because it was the one found with most scale information in the previous work that I mentioned. We trained a linear regression of the scale ratios in the activations of this mixed 8 layer. We then evaluate the scale prediction on new data with the R-squared coefficient of determination. So we evaluate how well can we predict image scale in new images. And I will now present the results. So starting with the alignment along individual dimensions. So the layer at which we analyze the network has 1,280 feature maps, which makes a 1,280 dimensional feature space. We regress the scale ratios in this space and normalize the regression vector. We sort the values of the coefficients, and we compute the norm of the vector when retaining d prime out of the 1,280 dimensions or coefficients. In this figure, we report the norm values for different number of dimensions d prime, with and without lasso regularization. A norm of 1 means that the scale is fully encoded in the d prime dimensions. We see that with lasso regularization in blue, only 40 coefficients are non-zero, and a few dimensions contain most scale information on the most left. To continue this evaluation, we vary the coefficient alpha of the lasso regularization, and we evaluate the scale prediction on new data with R squared. We plot the R squared for the corresponding non-zero coefficients. The higher the alpha value, the fewer non-zero coefficients. The evaluation of the images used for training the regression is in orange, and the test images in blue. R square equal to 1 is a perfect prediction of the scale, while R square equals 0 is a prediction equivalent to predicting the average. Okay, so what we see in the results is first a good generalization with results on test images similar to the training ones. With 10 out of 1,280 dimensions, we can predict the scale with R square approximately 0.6, which is a good prediction. But we see that the scale is encoded as a combination of several feature maps. It is not a single feature map that contains all scale information, as the R square is very low for a single dimension on the most right of the figure. So after looking at the alignment of scale information along individual dimensions, we now look at the consistency of the encoding of scale information across classes or across the data manifold. In the previous experiments, we used test images of the same class as the images used for training the regression. We now evaluate the prediction of scale in unseen classes. So we train a lasso regression on the albatross class, and we tested on the kitebird class, which is similar to the training, and racing car class, which is totally different from the training. We find a relatively good prediction of scale on unseen classes when trained with lasso regularization. This suggests that the scale information is encoded in a similar way, regardless the type of input image. For more details, if we vary the regularization coefficient, as we did in the previous experiments, we see that the best regression of scale on images of unseen classes is obtained with approximately 40 dimensions. To continue this analysis, we train individual regression models on different classes. We then compare the models in terms of angle and cosine similarity between the regression vectors. So we don't have test images here, we directly compare regression models. An important point is that the number of almost orthogonal vectors grows exponentially with the dimension of the space. Here we have a 1,280 dimensional space, and for example, an angle of 64 or 76 degrees obtained with the lasso regression reflects similarities in these high dimensional vectors. So these results further support the hypothesis of scale encoding being common across the data manifold, with yet some amount of local encoding specific to different types of objects and classes. So that's it for the results. And in conclusion, we proposed an experimental evaluation of scale equivariance inside pre-trained CNNs. We showed that scale information is encoded as a combination of a few response maps, approximately 3%, We also showed that scale information is encoded in a relatively consistent way across the data manifold, with some local encoding specific to different types of classes. And finally, this analysis can be performed for the transformations and concepts. Thank you.